What is going on, fantasy football family? Welcome to Shoot the Gap. We are fashionably late as always on Fantasy and Frames Wednesdays. I'm your host, Jorge Edwards. It's Justin Taylor. The playoffs have arrived for many of us. Week 15 fantasy football playoffs, IDP Fantasy Football. We're going to get you caught up on some news and notes, give you some players that we think you should play and fade, and we'll answer all your questions. You all know the drill. You all been tuning in well enough over the course of the season. We truly appreciate that. So before we get to all that, let's get to this. So, JT, we were talking before the show, and you are under the weather, my friend. I just want to say, first of all, thank you for being on the show tonight, and for everybody who's starting to watch as we're going live right now. Let's give it up for JT. Some round of applause there.
Sorry, man. I just fight through the last 2 weeks. Been a little bit brutal. Like I was telling you before the show, I think my girlfriend's daughter got me sick, and then I think someone else got me sick because I've actually gotten worse the last week than I was the week before. Yeah, man. So it's crazy. It's not the worst thing ever, but I can't stay awake. I'm tired as can be. I've been sleeping a ton, which isn't usually like me. I usually only sleep like 4 or 5 hours a night, and then like I sleep one long day a week. I just got a weird schedule. But yeah, it's been brutal. I'm getting nothing done the last 2 weeks as I just find myself sleeping and sleeping and sleeping some more, which I know I'm sick because that's when I sleep a lot, is I know I'm sick. So, but hey, it's fantasy playoffs. Nobody's 100% this time of year. We just got to fight through, right? And we got to move on. We got to get some wins. Got to get on that next round. No time to relax now.
No, I'm with you on the sick part. Going back to work after bringing Nathaniel home. I was offered for November. Took parental leave. I go back my first couple weeks, already feeling like crap. I got home yesterday, and I look at my wife and I'm like, I got you Saturday, Sunday, Friday. I got you for the whole weekend. I need today to sleep. And I kid you not, I went to sleep at like 7 p.m. and next thing you know, I'm waking up to the Rocky theme, which is my morning alarm at 5:30 a.m. And I'm like, oh my God. So definitely feel the whole, people getting sick here this time of year. Weather's all sorts of crazy. We all know that. Thanks a lot, global warming. And,
and what I've learned too is as I've gotten older, I've learned like when I get sick, really that's the only way I get better is to sleep. Like I have to sleep. My body needs me to sleep and rest and like sweat out whatever I have and do whatever I need. I just got to rest and not try to keep fighting it. Because then it just lasts longer and longer. So that's something I've had to definitely learn over the years. It's like I can press through, I can fight through, I'll get better, I'll take some meds, and I just realize all the meds are just covering it up, and I'm just sick for longer and longer. So it's like you gotta rest, gotta rest when your body's telling you need to.
Absolutely. But speaking of rest or a lack thereof, we are not going to be resting entering 2025. Starting in 2025, you can search for all of the podcasts here at Fantasy and Frames by name, wherever you listen to podcasts. So, for example, or por ejemplo, as half of my culture says, you can subscribe here to the Shoot the Gap podcast. Wow, that's like the only Spanish I've used like in the past 5 years. That's horrible. The Shoot the Gap podcast here, specifically, that way you don't have to worry about, well, I subscribe to the Fantasy and Frames podcast, but it's always the Shoot the Gap one's always down the list of podcast episodes I listen to. Now you don't have to worry about that. Shoot the Gap podcast. You can listen to Fourth and Frames, who was on. They were just on this earlier. Dynasty 365. The One Put Down. We got the Draft Show podcast. We got all sorts of stuff coming at you in 2025. But we ask you, wherever it is you're watching, listening, please like, subscribe, and review. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, what you want to hear, what you want to hear less of. And we'll definitely take all that, and we'll make sure we give you the best product we can. Also, make sure to head over to fantasyandframes.com for the latest weekly IDP and Dynasty rankings, articles, takes, news, and notes. I mean, we have a lot of people putting out a lot of amazing content, and it is there for you all. It's all free. You know, like I said, we have our rankings. Our initial rankings are going to be going up tomorrow morning. Just you know, we love to provide everything we can to make sure that you all, one, have fun playing fantasy football, two, are successful playing fantasy football. And what better time to have fun and be successful than the fantasy football playoffs? Willpower in the chat. I feel like he has become like a regular now here on Shoot the Gap. He was on, he was on Dynasty 365 earlier. I'm surprised he wasn't on Fourth and Frames. He's on the Fantasy Football Kickoff Show. Will, if you are on Twitter, DM me at Jorge B. Edwards, and I'm going to send you some Fantasy and Frame swag because we really appreciate you tuning in each and every week. He has to say in the chat, it's also what you eat at Thanksgiving. Your body is cleansing itself. That's a good point. That's fair. That's fair. Although that's been a few weeks since Thanksgiving. Like, what's
well, that's the first thing I thought of when I was starting to feel sick. I was like, it's just Thanksgiving, eating a ton of stuff. And I'm one of those people when if I eat a bunch, I get real tired. Just my body's like, it's nap time. So I was like, maybe it's that. Maybe I drink a little bit or something. And the next thing I know, I'm like, I'm really sick. Like 2 days later, I was like, nope, it was definitely just being sick. So, but yeah, that Will is right on that one though. Definitely got to cleanse, got to get that cleanse in.
Absolutely. We got the guest for Fourth and Frames last hour. Got Chris Battle still in the chat. He's got a bit of a conundrum. Fantasy and frame scoring, JT, to give you an idea of fantasy and frame scoring, and for those out there, a little bit higher for pass deflections for some of the TFLs, quarterback hits. It is a balanced scoring, but the point values for the big plays are a little bit higher than your traditional balanced scoring. Just to give you an idea there, he's starting Brian Branch and Byron Murphy. He says, am I chasing Trayvon Moehrig or starting one of Cameron Britt Taylor, Jordan Battle, Jordan Poyer, Lenore, or Gardner Johnson? What are your thoughts here?
I love the Branch and Murphy start. I was all over starting Murphy last week, as if you watched on the show, he was my play. Boom, he got a pick. I love it. Moehrig, I feel like we've been talking about him for a couple weeks where everybody's like, why is he down? Why hasn't he been scoring? Where's he been? And of course, all of a sudden, boom, he has a big week this last week to get us back in there. Oh man, I'm looking at the Atlanta matchup. That might actually be a nice little one for him. To me, I'm leaning Moehrig or Jordan Poyer against the Texans. Those would probably be my two leans. Taylor Britt, people have been going after him, but the Titans matchup, I think they're going to try to run the ball a lot. So I don't think he's going to see as many targets as he has been going against him. To me, I'm probably going Moehrig, and I'm chasing it against Atlanta. See if he can put 2 big weeks together in a row. If not him, I would go Poyer as my number 2 pick in that. What do you think, Jorge?
I'm chasing Trayvon Moehrig as well. More importantly, I'm chasing his 50% box snap utilization last week. We saw that kind of help elevate his fantasy floor back to what we were seeing for most of the year. Atlanta, it's not Kirk Cousins who's doing anything for that offense, that's for sure. So definitely they're going to be relying on the running game going forward in terms of game script.
You got to think he's going to be helping out on the Bijan against the run, right? That's right. Kind of my thought. He's going to have to get in there, help Spillane, get some stops. I think that, and then, with the way Cousins has been throwing picks lately, maybe he gets lucky and gets one, maybe gets a tip or something. So that's kind of why I agree with you with the box. I think he's going to be in the box trying to help stop Bijan.
In terms of the second one, so Jordan Poyer, that one is a little concerning for me because we're seeing, Javon Holland, who is coming back, or has been in the process of getting back to his norm from injury. He's actually starting to take a little step ahead in terms of box snap percentage over Poyer. So that is a little concerning there.
Poyer's got some tackles lately, but he's been a little more of a fade for me of late, to be honest with you. I haven't played him in a lot of spots. He's had some decent tackle games. But like you said, Holland's a guy I would rather play over Poyer, but man, I'm not loving Gardner Johnson this year. I don't know what you think about him. Lenore, I think that's a pretty heavy Morig. I think you and me go with Morig. I like that. Like I said, Poyer maybe, but I would play Morig over Poyer. I just don't like the battle or Taylor Britt play. And Gardner Johnson's been a little disappointing to me this year.
Yeah, I think I would roll. Let me just check one more thing here, Crispy. Appreciate you tuning in. Man, I don't like it, but I'm going to recommend it, and that's I would stick with Brian Branch and go with Branch and Morig in the situation. Those would be my two guys right there. So yeah, just keep firing away more questions if you have any. We're always here for you, Chris. You know that. Fantasy and Frames family looks out for each other as we all do each and every week. Will says, I barely use the Twitter and X, but I'll send you a message for sure. Hope I can remember my password. You can also contact me, Jorge at fantasyandframes.com. That is my Fantasy and Frames email, if that is easier for you. Crispy says he has to tap in to shoot the gap, two of the smartest in the room. Really appreciate that. That means a lot.
Thanks, man.
Willpower said, just lost Tyler Newman. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. When we get
brutal.
We got Brandon in the chat here. He was on Fourth and Frames. He was on Fourth and Frames last hour. What's up, Brandon? Max Crosby said he was going to sack both Falcons quarterbacks. So he was going to sack the Cousins Phoenix. Is that right? See what I did there?
Yep.
Or I should say that's what Brandon said in the comment after. Okay, I'll stop with the raunchiness. That's for the Waiver Wire show with Stacey Perez, Keith Fleming, Erica Brown, Rich Sickles, and Kevin Tompkins. You degenerates, the Degeneration X of Fantasy and Frames.
I could see Max having a nice game this week, though. Tell you what, I think he's been slightly disappointing this year. Just he's playing hard. He's playing good. Just the stats haven't been racking up. But man, if you got him, I'd break him out this week.
Well, speaking of things to get, let's get to some news and notes. All right, so I'm going to go out of order on the show sheet. Just peek behind the curtain there, folks, because this one hurts a lot. This one hurts me a lot. I have been a huge fan of his coming out of Texas, converted safety to linebacker, rookie year cut short in the preseason versus a preseason game, I believe it was against Seattle, tore his ACL, came back this year, was impressing in OTAs, was impressing in training camp. Finally, as the season has gone on, took over as one of the lead linebackers. Not even 5 days ago, they were talking about in Dallas media that they were going to build this defense around Micah Parsons and the player that I'm about to discuss, DeMarvion Overshown. Truly heartbreaking. Just from like a person standpoint, a fan of these athletes. This past Monday on Monday Night Football, knee injury, torn ACL, MCL, PCL. There's talk that he may even miss the entire 2025 season. We'll get into something in Money Mirage regarding Overshown, but did you watch did you watch that game and when the injury happened, JT?
Yeah, I did. And, they're like, oh, knee injury. I was like, oh, no. I'm like, I didn't see exactly like when it first happened, like exactly what happened to him. And I'm like, oh, man, hopefully he just sprained like a knee or something. And then they're like, got him on there like, oh, this doesn't look good at all. Once they started seeing replays, it's like, no, it's like, I feel so bad from a guy like that just started to get it going. And you're like, man, you see the athleticism, you see what he can do as an IDP player, you get excited about a guy like that. And you're like, that one looked bad. And then once you started, I was like, oh man, this one's rough. And now I've seen a lot of talk is what do you do with him now? Do you wait on him? Do you hold him? I mean, you love what he was, the possibility, you love what he could bring. And now you're talking about maybe a whole season, got to sit out on him. Can he come back? Oh, it's so tough. A young guy like this, you're rooting for him, but man, that's a brutal way to go out here to end the year.
We'll answer that in Money Mirage, but it is it is a pickle. We hope for a speedy recovery. I don't even want to say a speedy recovery. Like at this point, like just recover.
Yeah, you're just hoping he like everything goes right with the surgeries and they can get it going and see what happens from there. But man, yeah, when those guys mess up multiple things, I mean, you're hoping that they can fix it and make it normal. I mean, I know some people had some pretty bad knee injuries over the years, and it affected the way they could walk and jog and run the rest of their life. And so you're hoping that when you see serious ones like that those guys got some good doctors. Hopefully they can repair all that.
Absolutely. So we're hoping for all that positivity getting us way. Okay, we got a couple of questions here in the chat. Let's go back to Brandon here. Who is in there if Aziz is referring to Aziz Shalshire, who was suspended for that bullshit hit on Trevor Lawrence? Pardon my language, a couple of weeks ago. He says
that was a bullshit hit. You can say that. It was a ridiculous hit.
Yeah, Devin White. No, do not start Devin White. If Henry To'oTo'o is there available on your waiver wire, I think he's an immediate start. If you look back to last week or 2 weeks ago, rather, he played 97% of snaps, had 11.8 tackle efficiency with 8 total tackles per PFF. And we saw when Alshire was out or kicked out of the game, Neville Hewitt stepped in there, playing the second most percentage of snaps with 70%. Had a tackle rate of 14.3, 7 total tackles. Devin White, out of all the linebackers in week 13, 8.6% total defensive snap share. That should tell you all you need to know as far as where Devin White falls in the pecking order. But one of the things we told you all last week to pay attention to going forward into this week was the availability of Christian Harris, linebacker out of the University of Alabama, and what exactly his role is going to be going forward. This is where paying attention to practice reports and news reporters and beat reporters, especially if you're on social platforms like Twitter or X or something, like block the BS that everybody complains about all the time and follow stuff that actually matters. You know what I mean? Like, the beat reporter for the Houston Texans who will tell you Christian Harris should look to resume duties next to Henry To'oTo'o this week, and Neville Hewitt, who stepped in replacement of Aziz Alshire, is going to be relegated back to third on the pecking order there. So definitely Henry To'oTo'o, if he is available there, that's easy. Put him in there, swap him in for Aziz. If he's not there, then we'll talk more about Christian Harris and Neville Hewitt going forward. But I would be surprised, JT, if Christian Harris did not start to get eased into a workable role, if you get what I'm saying.
I agree. I think Hewitt is good. If you pick up Hewitt and play Hewitt, I think you're gonna be playing with fire. Just to see how much of actually snap share he gets, and if they're not going to get Christian Harris in there. So Hewitt was kind of a nice little fill-in in deeper leagues when a bunch of guys were out with injury. But I think like you said, Devin White, absolutely not. Don't even think about it. Hewitt is like real iffy. Yeah, it's hopefully we'll know this week. But again, that's the problem when you're in the playoffs. You kind of need to know who to play. So it's like you don't have a week to wait on a guy. So if you can find someone else, obviously go away from that defense, other than the guys you just talked about, then do it. But I know sometimes at this point of the year, you're struggling to find picking guys up off the waiver wire and playable guys at this point in the season.
Our next question here again from Chris Batts. He says, thoughts on Tyree Snyder? I got some thoughts. He had a little bit of a down week last week, but you look over the past month.
Do we want to talk about him in Money Mirage?
Ooh, yeah. Let me save that for Money and Mirage then. Wink.
Just say it. We were just going to talk about him a bunch, so I didn't know if you wanted to jump right into it or if we were going to wait a second. So
no, we should be patient. We should make the people wait. Not too long though. Sorry, Chris. We will get to your.
We'll jump right back into him.
We'll jump right back. Exactly what JT just said. Continuing on with some news, Jalen Petrie, safety for the Houston Texans, out for the season, announced today with a pectoral injury. That's a thing that happened. Going forward, to our next player we'll be discussing is Nick Bosa, and this is a tough one. Still questionable currently with an oblique injury. Thursday Night Football versus the Rams. He hasn't played for a few weeks. Man.
It's tough. Well, and here's the thing is they're not completely out of the playoff race. So it's like
Right.
you think he will try to play if he can, because if they were completely out, I'd be like, man, maybe they just like don't try to play him at all. But
Yeah.
it's frustrating. If you're somebody like me, I've got him in quite a few salary IDP leagues, and I spent a load of money on him to get him. It's really hurting to not be able to play him at a defensive end spot in a couple of those leagues right now. It's rough.
No, absolutely. But yeah, it's definitely a rough situation here. And even if he does get the start, I would be
cautious to play him.
Very cautious. Like if he's like your saving grace, I posed the question on Fourth and Frames last hour, and I said, okay, matchup versus start your studs. Which narrative can you live with if you lose? And the consensus that they had was, I can deal losing if I started my studs and it didn't work out, versus playing a matchup and leaving a stud on the bench who goes off for 20 plus points. I'm a little bit walking that fine line, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
You do enough of the research, you do enough of the analysis of trends of what's going on in recent weeks, and I think I'm getting to the point now in Yonder's old age here that if a thought process works, great. If it doesn't, the way I expect it to, I can live with that, because I just spent the past 7 hours during the week researching this player, and I don't like leaving things to blind luck of like start your studs, because they're name values and you drafted them so high. As far as I'm concerned, where you drafted somebody in terms of ADP in August goes out the window after week 1. Like if somebody's not playing well, they're not playing well. Like I'm not going to be starting them just because they have a name. Now the question is, do I still feel that way with Nick Bosa if I have to play Nick Bosa and he's like the saving grace for my IDP team? I don't think I do.
If I had like no other option, like I'm looking at like him or just an absolute dud, where I'm like, this guy, I'm going to be winging a prayer if he does anything, then I would say play him. But I'm with you. Like I'm a little more play your studs during the regular season. But man, when it comes to playoff time, you need every single point, because you're playing other good teams. You're not going to get lucky. Most likely not get lucky and they just have a horrible week, or you're playing against a bad team in the regular season where you can take a chance if your guy doesn't have a big game. I can't afford to get zeros. I mean, I can't afford a guy like re-aggravates, goes out, plays 10 snaps, or is just kind of banged up so he doesn't go hard the whole game. And then you end up losing just that barely, and and you're like, if I would have just played the other guy and he got me something, I would have won. Right. So I'm with you on that. I'm doing the research. I'm following the trends. I'm gonna play a guy that I think. I mean, I'm not playing a stud just because he's a stud, name value in the playoffs. I'll do it a little more in the regular season, as I feel like I got a little more of an upsided chance. But man, when it comes down to playoffs and moving on, I'm going with somebody else if there's a chance that they're not going to play or it's going to be really questionable, as long as I think that other person has any ability to score. I'm not just like, right, putting a third string linebacker in for him because I'm like, you know what I mean? Is you got to play, obviously you got to weigh that stuff out, but I agree with you on that.
And like, I remember there was an incident, and I'm sorry folks, I promise you we'll get back to defensive talk, but I remember there was a year, I want to say it was 2013, and I had on my bench whoever the Vikings quarterback was, who was a streaming option, who was tearing it up the past few weeks. Was it Sage Rosenfels? I don't want to say it was Sage Rosenfels, but I think it was. But he was tearing it up for the Vikings, and he had a great matchup. And my other quarterback was Drew Brees going against the Legion of Boom on Monday Night Football. And one of my friends, good old Ken Sonnenberg, said, "Oh, you got to start Drew Brees. You got to start your stud. He's like, well, the Seahawks are only allowing, like a touchdown and 11 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. Are you sure? Oh, you got to start your studs. And Sage Rosenfels went off and Drew Brees did not. Now, for every situation or instance, there's that. Somebody could come to me and say that there's the exact opposite, and I get it. I'm just giving you my personal take here. For me, I feel more comfortable knowing that I did the research, and if it worked out, great. If it didn't, whatever. For those who were asking questions in the chat for offense, JT will be getting to those in the chat. We reserve on-air questions for IDP only. Let's keep this thing going, though. Tyler Newbin, this sucks, JT, because I want to say you and I both.
We were just talking about him last week because I pulled him off my taxi. In a couple of leagues, I had him stashed, and I was like, "Oh man, some big weeks coming up." I had some injuries in my secondary, and he had been scoring really well, and I was like, "I'm going to pull him off the taxi for the run down the stretch here." I pull off the taxi, and now he's hurt. I was like, just kills, man, because he was actually starting to really come on and look good for people here down the stretch.
Yeah, I felt comfortable starting him, week in and week out, and I get the alert up from my sleeper app, and it's like it went straight from healthy, not even to questionable, just healthy to IR. I'm like, God damn, what the fuck? What's just happening?
We're gonna have to be ready for that. I tell you what, I hate to say it this time of the year though, is as these teams get knocked out, and a lot of these guys are, coaches are still going to coach, teams are still going to play hard in the NFL. No one tanks like the NBA. It just doesn't happen in the NFL where guys just give up. But when you start seeing these young guys that are important to teams, right, if they have questionable injuries, that's where you're going to see a lot of these guys go IR. They're just not going to rush them back to get them into a late game. I mean, they want to win. They still want to play hard, but they're not going to take a chance on long-term injuries or making these things worse with some of these guys. So definitely this is the time of year in the playoffs. Got to keep an eye out where, something that might be a 1 week injury or a possible 2 week injury early in the season. They just say, hey, we only got 4 or 5 weeks left. Let's just IR that guy and not take a chance.
No, that makes sense. One piece of news here that I am happy to say, we've talked about a couple players already that are gone down to injury for the season or are dealing with an injury. It was very refreshing to see Talanoa Hufanga for the San Francisco 49ers come back and play last week. And we saw that he played, second in the team in amongst safeties and total defensive snap share was 73.6%. Loved seeing a team leading at safety at 43.6% box snap percentage. I want to say Malik Mustafa is currently dealing with an injury, and he might be questionable to out going this week, this Thursday. I need to confirm that. But even if he wasn't, Hufanga just screams the perfect matchup to play. Here's a situation where I'm like, I will go with what I know about this guy. When playing close to the line of scrimmage, the guy racks up tackles numbers. The Los Angeles Rams, they're going to want to run the ball with Kyren Williams. It's going to a divisional matchup, insert narrative, insert lack of statistical references. But, I think the fact that he is going to be so close to the line of scrimmage and has shown that he's already going to be that so early on coming back from his ACL injury last year. And we're not talking he was there 20%. No, he was 40%. It's almost half of his snaps already. And we weren't seeing him play in the slot too much. He was basically there default linebacker, and that is great news for him. I feel really confident with Hufanga this week. Are you as confident, or are you still kind of no, not so sure?
I like him. He was a big comeback for me because I lost Newbin in that same league. So I was like, I'm going to put Newman on IR and pull him off IR. So it was kind of a nice trade there. He's a guy, I think he's proven that he can play and get in there good. If he's available and he's getting the snap share, I don't mind playing him, especially after kind of seeing what happened last week with him coming back. I think he's a guy you can get back in your lineups if you need him at a DB spot.
We got Out of Rhythm Fantasy Where's college, JT? Well, JT, when will the college betting show be coming back?
Yes, sorry. My Ben, who does the college betting show with me, was actually at the Illinois basketball game last night and didn't get back till real late. So we didn't want to run the show at like 1 a.m. Eastern time. So we will run the college betting show on Thursday night. I actually meant to put something out there today about that to let people know. But we're going to run it Thursday night. Most likely we'll run it as soon as Thursday night football is over. We tend to like to try to jump on after the football game for people that are watching that game and doing that stuff. So we'll probably jump on here on Fantasy and Frames, the Stu with JT Brew college betting show, talking playoffs, college football playoffs, which we're all pumped for. First year, the 12-team tournament. We will talk about all those games most likely after Thursday night NFL football tomorrow night.
I would love to be a fly on the room when you guys talk about the different bowl games and where your thoughts are for which games you like and which prop bets we should place money on, because there are a lot of good ones out there. Looking at the
playoffs are going to be awesome. I'm super excited for the playoffs. The only thing that I don't like now is I used to get so pumped for bowl season, and now with all these guys transferring and all the guys going to the NFL, a lot of these bowl games are real rough. Like there's a ton of guys that just skip out on them, and you end up looking at a completely different team in a lot of these bowl games. So those are ones I tell people, if you're going to be betting on those games, you better really do your research on who's playing and who's not for each team, because things can drastically change. I watched a couple games last year. I got in a bowl mania and we had to put it in like before the first bowl game started. And believe me, I was like, oh, I would have changed a bunch of games if I realized all these guys were not going to play in like a week or two, or they were going to decide, quarterback's going to decide to transfer who started all season. So yeah, those ones got to be rough, but the playoff games, we know everybody's playing in those. They're going to be great. So looking forward to talking about that. Is the first year of the 12-team playoff. Pretty pumped about it.
Absolutely. All right, that's going to do it for news and notes. Let's get into one of our fun segments that we haven't done in a while, but it's going to help answer Chris Battisell question about Tyrese Knight, we think. Let's get into Money Mirage. All right, JT, take it away. You crafted this one for Money Mirage for this week. What are your thoughts? What do you got for us here?
Yeah, so Chris, this is one that you were thinking the same thing I was. My head was in the same space. Looking at Tyrese Knight, the rookie linebacker out of UTEP for the Seahawks. Seahawks have moved around with linebackers, a bunch of guys, trades, moving every round. Ernest Jones out there, the man. Where are we at as an IDP community moving forward here with Tyrese Knight? Do we think he can actually be a legit LB2 or LB3 moving forward headed into next year for IDP purposes? He's played 4 straight games as a starter, 80% snap share in those 4 games. He's got 35 tackles, a sack, a fumble recovery, and 2 passes defense in those 4 starts. Really nice numbers for the rookie. So is it a money or mirage? We think Tyrese Knight going in next season is a buy, and we think he can be a legit starter every week in an LB2 or LB3 for IDP purposes.
So this is going to sound crazy. I think this is money, and let me tell you why. How many times has Ernest Jones been traded just during the season? Was it 3 times?
You would think that would be a factor with a guy, but that's crazy. Been tried 3 times this year.
Yeah, hold on. It was the Rams to the Titans, then the Titans to the Seahawks. And I'm surprised he hasn't been. Well, I guess the trade deadline has passed, so I guess I'm not surprised.
Well, I guess it feels like he's been traded 3 or 4 times, but I guess it's only 12.
Yeah, if there was no trade deadline, I guarantee you he would have been traded 2 more times since going to Seattle. We don't know what a financial investment they've made in Ernest Jones. This whole getting traded multiple times in season, very concerning. So you could be looking at a situation where Tyrese Knight walks into an LB1 role on that team if Ernest Jones is no longer there coming the next season. I don't think they have a lot of financial contracts or money tied into him, Ernest Jones, that is. Whereas, like you said, rookie, development, playing well. I could definitely see him being an LB2 based off of his current track record and performance, going to Fantasy Pro scoring over the past 4 weeks. Tyrese Knight, 15 solo tackles, 20 assisted tackles. He even got you a sack and a pass deflection. The LB 17, averaging 12.8 points per game. He screams too much of a good value to. And what I like about what you said there, JT, is not just LB2, but even an LB3 or an IDP flex option. I think he perfectly fits that role for fantasy managers. So, Chris Battistel, if he's on your, if you happen to be in an IDP league, for Dynasty, that just may happen to be part of the Fantasy and Frames IDP League fantasy, thing we got going on, and Tyrese Knight is available, I'd pick him up. I'd hold on to him for a little bit.
I just grabbed him in an RSO contract league. Now I'm upset about it because I only get him for this season because I didn't draft him. But I think he's worth playing down the stretch here. I actually picked him up, played him last week with all the bye weeks. I had a bunch of guys that were sitting out. And so I picked him up and played him. He had a nice week, and now I'm really eyeing it for this week, just trying to decide if I'm going to play him again this week because I've got some tough matchups. I'm actually going to. We don't usually talk about this, Jorge, but I'm going to throw it out to you. Get your thoughts on this real quick. So, in my one league where I've got him in, I'm debating on my high defensive scoring here for this team. I've got to choose between, and I've got a nice defense here, so I'm going to warn you there. So I've got Patrick Queen, EJ Speed, Jermaine Pratt, Nick Bolton. I got 3 linebacker spots in a flex spot. I've got those 4 guys, plus I have Knight. Does Knight make it into your lineup over any of those other guys this week? It's a real tough call. I've been leaning on those guys heavy, but he has looked really good lately. All those guys have been playing really well. Would you trust the rookie and play him over any of those guys?
So let's think about this. EJ Speed has been borderline elite at linebacker, so he's a set it and forget it guy. Mm-hmm. No more Logan Wilson. That screams upside for Jermaine Pratt. Let me actually take a look here. I didn't check.
Pratt the last couple of weeks has had quite he had 7 tackles against Dallas. He had 13 the week before against Pittsburgh. They had the bye week. He had 8 the week before that, 8 the week before that. I mean, he's been consistently an 8-9 plus tackle guy per game. Now they've got Tennessee, which you got to think they're going to be pounding the rock. A bunch of chances to get tackles in that one. You got Nick Bolton going against Cleveland, which he's picked it up. Been kind of slow this year. He's actually been getting into the mix a little bit. And then you get Patrick Queen, this week going against Philly, who we know is the number 1 rushing offense in the league.
Yeah, Patrick Queen over the past month is the LB 15 in points per game. Man, I would go Speed, Pratt, and this week I'd go Knight, and Will agrees in the chat here. You look at the Cleveland Browns, you would think, oh, it's the Cleveland Browns. You want to stop Nick Chubb. Well, no.
They've been throwing the ball like crazy lately.
Yes, exactly. That kind of takes away some of the run power there. So I would sit Bolton, and I would throw in Tyrese Knight there. Especially with Josh Jacobs has been running the ball, and how Green Bay has been making a point of emphasis to run the ball more. That just screams a good linebacking day for the Seattle linebackers.
I know. I love that group, and I'm playing those other guys, but I picked up Knight, and he had a great game last week, and I was looking at it. I was like, man, I kind of like his matchup. I was like, I kind of want to play him this week, and I'm in a big playoff matchup this week that's going to be really close. So every point's going to matter. Like I said, this is a high-scoring defensive league. So it's a lot of points. We get 2 points per tackle, solo tackle, and 1.5 per assisted tackle. So your defensive guys, if they put a game together, they can get you a lot of points. They can score you 20, 30 points.
Out of Rhythm Fantasy, first of all, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Got Pratt off of waivers, who's been killing it. I'm saying, man,
that's been fire. The Pratt's been great this year. I mean, he's one of those names that people just they kind of overlook him because he's been in the league for a while. He's been solid, but he's never been great. He's having by far his best year of his career this year. Now that Logan Wilson's out, you're going to count on him for a lot more tackles.
Will says in the chat, plus with Njoku banged up, Bolton might cover the backup tight end. Right, exactly. And so is Jameis Winston going to be throwing to the backup tight end, or Jerry Jeudy, who's had a career resurgence?
And well, we know Jameis likes to chuck it, right? So Jameis ain't really a dump it off type of guy. He likes to freaking throw the ball down the field.
Did you ever see Zach and Miri make a porno of the movie, the Kevin Smith movie?
Yes. Yep.
I like it when they're in the coffee shop and the drunk Steelers fan walks in. He's like, "Hook it, chuck it, football all night." Folks, it's a great reference. It's a great movie. First of all,
it's been a long time since I've seen that movie. That's funny though.
I've been watching a lot of old stuff and showing Nathaniel.
I tell you what, I'm on this.
I'm not sure of that one.
Late 90s, early 2000s tear. Yeah, I've been going through this 90s, 2000s tear of old movies I haven't watched forever. I've been saving them all and making my girlfriend watch it with me. It's hilarious.
Tam music. We will answer that one in the chat. Don't worry. He's asking you Tua, Sam. Yeah, dude.
Of course, Tua Sam. That's that. I was all over that last week. I couldn't decide to start Tua Sam. I half and halved it. In every league I didn't start Sam. It totally burned me because I scored 25 points less. That's a toughie. So I'll jump in there and answer that one.
No, but I'm with you on going back to 90s and 2000s. I'm going back I bring Nathaniel into the basement in the man cave in the home theater area. I have his little bouncy chair. I'm like, all right, we're going to start watching WrestleManias from when I started watching WrestleMania 6. And we watched that one. Then I started in WrestleMania 40, this past one. Watched all the Lord of the Rings Extended Editions. And I tried Avengers. He's not ready for that. I tried Star Trek. He's not ready for that. But, comedies, at which point do you do the comedy thing? I will say my wife has had the Eras Tour, the Taylor Swift concert that she just wrapped up. That's available on Disney Plus playing. And he's been jamming to that a little bit. And I've had to watch that a few times. And I got to be honest with you, you may not like her music, ladies and gentlemen, but imagine being physically active nonstop for 3 hours. That's a fucking crazy achievement. So good for her. But
I tell you what, I always tell people this. I used to, when Walker, my son, was little, he loved Stewie from Family Guy. So we used to watch Family Guy all the time when he was little before he could speak because he didn't understand what they're saying. He didn't understand the jokes, but he thought Stewie and Brian were absolutely hysterical. So I would hold them and they would do stuff and he would just laugh and smile the whole time. So I watched Family Guy a ton of it with him when I was little. And I was an old school, metal punk kid. And so I was a big MTV music. When I was younger, I wanted to make music videos. I thought it'd be I wanted to be in a band, but I'm terrible musically, just absolutely awful musically. I'm bad at guitar. I can't sing. So I was like, I would love to make music videos. So I used to have all these DVDs with all these old music videos on them. I would crank those in there sometimes and walk around with them, and he loved them. You think of oh, it's too loud. It's too. People are like, why are you playing that for him? Play like a little kid's Carol or something. I'm like, nah. I put that in there and walk around with him, kind of bouncing with him. He loved it. And then when the guys would scream in the music videos, he would scream with them. He would go, ah. It was hilarious. People looked at me like I was crazy. But that's what I told you. I was like, you got to figure out what works for you and your kids because everybody's different. Every kid's different and what works and what doesn't. Because I did stuff people were like, I can't believe that works or that's not driving your kid insane. But he loved it and it worked for us. And I didn't have to watch the little kiddie shows that drove me insane. So that helped as well because I could laugh at Family Guy and not have to watch some little kid show.
Absolutely. And I don't know. I know, folks. This is the content you've been coming here for. But you know how we roll and shoot the
I get off track. I get going on some other things. I'm going to jump back in the chat and answer some questions here.
There you go. We do get on tangents, but hopefully they're fun tangents that you can at least enjoy while we're serenading you with good fantasy football talk. I got a money mirage question for you. You have a small bench and maybe 2 IR spots in your fantasy football league. One scenario, it's both a combined offense and IDP league. 2 IR spots. Does one of those go to DeMarvin Overshown?
Man, that's tough. It's tough because I see he's a guy I would want to put on the IR and hold on to, but with
Right.
it possibly being an entire year and
Mm-hmm.
knowing that I'm probably going to need that spot to move guys on or off, you know what I'd probably end up doing? I'd probably put
Mm-hmm.
on my IR and hold him as long as I possibly could. But the
Right.
second I got desperate and I was like, oh, I need to move another guy that's going to come back,
Right.
I would probably end up dropping him. I've done this in the past with some other guys where I'm like, oh, he's going to miss a long period of time. And I hold him as long as I possibly can. But yeah, it's if you're in a short bench league with not a lot of IR spots, I think it's going to be real hard to hold him all year, knowing that, is he going to come back? When's he going to come back? Again, with that kind of injury, even if he does come back, how long does it take him to get back to 80, 85, 90% of what he was? That one's a rough one for me.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm in a couple leagues with like 10 IRs, if I'm in a
Yeah.
league with 10 IRs, I'm keeping them. I'm putting them on that IR and holding them as long as I possibly can. If it's two, man, I just don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I have the patience to hold him that long. And why I think he's got a lot of talent, I don't know if it's like he's been that so proven guy that you're like, oh, you just can't give up on him yet.
Right.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. I have him in one of my IDP leagues, Dynasty leagues, and it's only IDP. It's no offensive players. I'm keeping him, knowing full well I'm going to come to a realization this time next year where it's like, let me put it like this: if I held on to him by this time next year, I might as well just wait till he comes back in 2026, right? If he comes back in 2026,
Mm-hmm.
but I digress. We got let's see here, we got Shaz 1999. I'm so
Shazabib.
sorry. Shaz.
Shazabe. I butchered everybody's name. That's why I go by JT. It makes it easy.
There we go. Good tangents, he says.
Likes the changes. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Out of rich fantasy, that's what brings people to your show. Well, since we like tangents, let me tell you one more tangent. Since we like talking about things that we did with our kids, the band Drowning Pool. Did I show you this? I feel like we've had this.
Oh, you did show me this, and this is fantastic.
So,
I was dying when you you showed me. I actually think you ought to play it real quick for the people because if people haven't seen it, it's absolutely hysterical.
okay, let me find it on YouTube. So basically, this group combined Drowning Pool with Sesame Street for a show I Can Count to Four. Wow, I can't believe we're actually going to be doing this.
This is good. I actually love it. Like I said, I've seen Drowning Pool in concert twice actually. So this is great.
Hey, hold on. Hold on.
We're like, what's going on in the show? Like, yeah, we're just going old school heavy metal. We're getting into the crazy stuff. Hey, we're doing a little bit of everything. But hey, doesn't old school metal and hardcore go with IDP? I feel like it does.
Yeah, it's I agree. And for those who are complaining about it, come on. Which nobody is complaining about it. So thank you very much. This is go seriously. I need to try this with my son. You all be the judge. My son is just over 2 months old. Is it too early to show him this? Ready? And here we go.
I can't help but laugh at that. It is so freaking great. I remember being in my early 20s in the mosh pit at Ozfest watching Drowning Pool. So that just absolutely cracks me up. I already love Drowning Pool. That's right. We got good. So we see the people on this show. People know what they're talking about. That's great. Will's also said he's seen the video. He loves it. Yeah. See, we have these people are in the know. Will's in the know. Out of rhythm, he knows. That's so freaking great. so funny.
It is funny and it is great. And speaking of great, before we get into IDP plays and fades, you want to pay the bills here, but do so with a really great company, Dynasty Decks. You can visit them at thedynastydex.com. Look, everybody likes trophies, everybody likes banners, everybody likes flags. However you want to celebrate winning your fantasy football championship is great. Dynasty Decks, the gentleman here talked to them before the Fantasy Football Expo this past August, met them at the Fantasy Football Expo. Quality guys, just wanting to help, fantasy managers out there commemorate their victories. And they make these plaques are like this big, and you get them customized to however you want. It doesn't matter if it's a Dynasty or a Redraft or IDP. It doesn't matter. Yes, I said IDP. There's actually a company out there that'll make you a championship plaque that has IDP positions and names on them. It's not just one of those companies where they just focus on offense. So I'm talking to you, all you IDP degenerates out there. Just like I said, we associate with quality people, and these two guys, they do a great job at dynastydex.com, thedynastydex.com. If you use the promo code FRAMES, you get $5 off. I want to say they are $50 a piece, so go to $45. So again, getting a great piece of championship hardware, quality piece of championship hardware that you can hang up anywhere, that they will tailor to IDP fantasy football managers. You can't ask for better than that. So definitely.
Dude, I'm so pumped about all these new companies that are coming out with all this cool stuff for I remember, leagues I started 15, 20 years ago and absolutely struggling to find cool trophies or anything for my IDP leagues. And now there's so much cool stuff you can get, whether it's championship belts, specifically made trophies, whether it's, championship rings. I just think it's so freaking cool. All the stuff that's available for leagues now. It's awesome. I've seen so many cool things over the last year or two that people have come up with for their leagues. It's pretty awesome.
Speaking of leagues, something we have not talked about, and that's my bad, for not bringing up throughout the season, is the Shoot the Gap podcast league that we started.
Where are we at on the playoffs on that? Who made it? Let's do a shout out to some of the listeners that made it.
Absolutely. So locking up the number one seed. So 6 teams can make the playoffs. Locking up the number one seed is at Toto Dinatale. You know who you are. So congratulations on locking up that first round bye. I got number 2, locking up the second first round bye. Then at number 3, we got team at I Davy Jones. Number 4, we got team at Gustav Hein 7. Team 5 at Brocal 44. At 6, team Sweating Glitter 247. That's Charlene, West Coaster, who always gets up early for the Fantasy and Frames Fantasy Football Kickoff Show at 9 a.m. Congrats everybody who made the playoffs. And again, the winner of that league will get a Dynasty Dex trophy or plaque. So looking forward to that. But I digress. Speaking of digressing, let's get to what people want to hear about. Let's get into some IDP plays and fades. So I apologize, first of all, JT, for all the tangents, including I can only count to 4, because I know you're not feeling well. So we're going to.
You're doing good. That made my night. That thing actually kills me. That's hilarious. I told you, I think I've said this on the show before. I bought an A to Z book for my nieces when my first niece was born, and it was the A to Z of heavy metal. Is what it was called. I bought it from Australia and got it shipped to me, and it had A to Z and was going through the alphabet, and it was like A is for AC/DC, and then we had a little thing about AC/DC And it would go like H is for headbanging. This is when you slash your head. I thought it was hysterical. It was my sister and my sister's first kid. She's my niece Avery, who's now in college. Goes to Colorado. My sister looked at me like, "What are you doing? Why would you buy this for them?" It's so funny. I thought it was like the coolest present ever. I was like, "This is so freaking sweet. This isn't like your normal everything." My sister did not think it was as funny as I did. And the best part is when I had my son Walker, she re-gifted it back to me. She's like, "Here you go for Walker." I was like, "That's awesome. I'll take it back. That's a great present." I'm like, "Thank you."
That's hilarious. All right. So folks, for those of you who don't know, you like starting or playing and fading the right players each and every week, head over to fantasyandframes.com. JT does a great job researching all these IDP plays and fades. His article will be late tomorrow, early Friday?
Yeah, probably late tomorrow. So I'm gonna try. I'm almost done with it. I'm working on it now. We'll get it out there. Should have it out before the game tomorrow night.
Awesome. And also for offense and defense special teams, Drew Scott at Drew3MR. First of all, folks, if you were not following Drew Scott at Drew3MR for your fantasy football needs, you were doing something wrong. One of the brightest people in the space, excuse me. Definitely a follow. He does our plays and fades for offense and defense special teams over at fantasyandframes.com. Again, probably late afternoon tomorrow. Unless there is a Thursday night player in their article, they will probably come out with these articles on Friday morning, so pay attention to those. All right, IDP, plays and fades. God damn it, Will. Of course, you have to ask the tough question. Hufanga or Morig?
Making it rough on us.
I know. I'm going Morig.
I think I like Hufanga coming back, but I think with Morig having the big game last week, everything we talked about with the Falcons earlier, really pounding the rock, him being in the box a little bit more. I think I'm gonna jump on Morig another week here. I think I'm gonna go him if I had to pick between those two guys.
There we go. All right, Leo, we see you in the chat right there. JT will take care of all the offensive questions. Let me get into plays and fades here. Zach Seiler, defensive lineman / defensive tackle, Miami Dolphins. And now, look, some of you may be playing in IDP leagues where it's a defensive tackle specific position where you need to fill, or you may be playing in leagues where you only have the option of playing a defensive lineman, linebacker, or defensive back. In Fantasy Pros IDP scoring over the past month, he is the defensive lineman overall 7, averaging 13.5 points per game. Interior defensive lineman. Now, you may be thinking, why do I care about interior defensive lineman? I want the edge rushers who get the sacks. Well, he gets some sacks too. He gets a lot of pressures, a lot of tackles. Got to remember, teams run up the gut. That's the defensive tackle who's making that tackle or a tackle for a loss. And going against this Houston offensive line, which is very porous, giving up 14 sacks on the season between both offensive guards for the Texans. Shaq Mason in particular over the past month has allowed 7 pressures and 3 sacks. If you have a DL3 or IDP, if you have a DL3 in your lineup, I feel really comfortable with Seiler this week going in there just because of the poor interior offensive line for the Houston Texans. And that's where I'm going with that. For my fade, now this one hurts because I told him to fade last week because the offensive tackles for the Green Bay Packers hadn't given up any sacks over the past month. And then, Zadarius Smith decides to go all Zadarius Smith and get you a sack last week. Gotcha. I want to say like 10 or so something fantasy points and Fantasy Pros IDP scoring. Well, I'm doubling down. I think that, every what is the expression? Every blind squirrel finds a nut or something. I could be butchering that expression, but you get what I'm saying. Lightning can strike. No, I still don't have the expression ready, but you really get what I'm saying, folks. Yes, Zadarius Smith over the past month, 20 pressures, 4 sacks, and 18.5% pressure rate. I mean, that's pretty freaking good, right? Now, here's the thing. Going against Buffalo the past month, you have these offensive tackles, much like Green Bay's last week. haven't given up sacks. They give a few pressures here and there, but for the most part, they're really good. The reason why I'm doubling down, though, and saying, you know what, you're not going to get me Zadarius Smith, not 2 weeks in a row, is Josh Allen. Jordan Love, not as mobile as Josh Allen. I think it's going to be harder for them to get Josh Allen down in the backfield. That's why I'm going to go Zadarius Smith as my fade this week. You're not scaring me there, Zadarius, so I'm going to double down there. So my play for this week is Zach Seiler as defensive lineman, especially if you lay in defensive tackle leagues. Start him because of the poor interior offensive line for the Houston Texans. And Zadarius Smith because of the Josh Allen scrambling factor is my fade. Who do you got at play and fade for defensive lineman, JT?
I'm going to give myself a mini pat on the back for last week. I was all over Cam Hayward. I told everybody jump on Cam Hayward, even if it's not a defensive tackle start league, put him in a D-line start league anyway. Monster week out of him. He played phenomenal. He's been on an absolute tear of late, especially even in defensive tackle. He's absolutely dominated, but he's been fantastic in just regular defensive line leagues this week. So big game out of him last week. He also was my sack lunch play, which is, you got to love when I can double up on those. So I loved Cam Hayward last week. So just want to kind of talk about that as he was the number 2 defensive line scorer in Fantasy Pro, scoring behind Yetur Gross-Matos. Where did he come from? Monster game out of him.
Really?
With 3 sacks. So Cam Hayward was the number 2 scorer behind Gross-Matos last week.
Good for you, Yetur Gross-Matos.
So yeah, big play. I was like, I remember that guy from Penn State. I was like, oh, look at he's still around and getting 3 sacks out of freaking nowhere. So I digress about my Cam Hayward play. I just had to throw that one out there. I wanted to also bring that up because my Gross-Matos, he's not my play this week with 3 sacks for the 49ers, but who is my play? The guy on the other side, Leonard Floyd for the 49ers. With Bosa out, Floyd's been taking over. He's been really good for this team. In week 15, he had 2 tackles, 2 sacks. He's been tearing it up lately. He's got 5.5 sacks in the last 4 games and 8.5 sacks on the season. This is the guy who the Bears thought they were drafting a long time ago. Floyd has been really, really good. I think he's going to put some pressure on this week on Thursday night against the Rams. So he's a guy I'm getting in there. I don't expect a lot of Bosa in this game if he plays at all. I think Floyd's going to be out there. And like I said, he has just been a wrecking crew lately. He's been really good. And after, kind of the slow start when he was at the Bears, he's actually been good the last couple teams he's been on. And he's just been a nice pickup and play. So if he's still out there in your leagues, go get him. He can be a linebacker DL on Sleeper, and depending on where you're playing him, he's probably a DN on my fantasy league, or at least he should be on my fantasy league, a DN. But he's a nice DL linebacker play as well. He's my play this week. I just really like what I've been seeing out of him lately, and then the snaps have just been there. So I like Leonard Floyd. My fade, and I know this is going to sound like a crazy fade, Jorge. You're like, how are you fading this guy at this point in the year? But I've got a lot of teams. I got him on a lot of teams, and I'm really, really questioning whether I'm going to play him this week. And that's why I want to bring him up in a fade, because I wanted to see kind of what the people thought or what you thought. But that's Greg Rousseau from the Bills. Now, he's had a really nice season, so don't get me wrong there. He's DL8 in Fantasy Pro scoring so far this year. So, I mean, how are you fading a guy in the top 10? He's been real boom of late, but he was a bust for a good part of the middle part of the season where he was not playing well. He's been hot, though. 3 sacks in 3 straight games. He's got a sack in 3 straight games, but I'm not overly optimistic this week. Tough matchup with the Lions. The Lions line has played really well of late. They've only given up 6 sacks in the last 6 games. And then 1 game against Houston, they gave up 3 sacks. Every other game has been 1 or 0. So it's been very tough to get to Jared Goff this year. It's one of those that we've talked about. We kind of brought it up in the Bosa thing where you say, hey, do you play your studs or do you play the matchup? Do you play thing? I've got a couple leagues where I think I might have some better plays than him as far as what I like the matchup better this week. So again, if you're not in a deep league, you're probably playing you're probably playing him because, I mean, he's got 3 straight sacks. He's been a top 10 player. He's a tough guy to fade at this point in the season. But I have to tell you, when all these points matter, you're basically looking, and he has not been a tackle guy this year. So he's basically been getting you 1 or 2 tackles and then a sack if he gets a sack. So you're relying on him getting home if he's going to give you points this week. Especially, I'm in a couple leagues that don't give a ton of points for sacks. It's not like a 4 sack league or 5-point sack league. You're like getting like 2 points for a sack. I'm looking at some other options at defensive end where I might get a guy has a chance to get a sack, but also a little more of a tackle floor. So he's one of those guys. Again, if you don't have any other options, he's your best option. I'm not saying don't play him, but he's definitely a guy on that verge for me of whether he's going to be a playable guy this week against the Lions.
I love it. You look at the past month here for the tackles for the Detroit Lions. We got Penei Sewell, 9 pressures, 0 sacks. Dan Skipper. Was he the guy who was throwing up in the Dan Campbell video, locker room video? Dan Campbell's like, yeah, you keep throwing up there, buddy, or something. 8 pressures, 1 sack over the past month. I don't think that's crazy at all. And again, I'm throwing name value out the window there. Let's see here. We got Scott here in the chat saying Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson were both dropped. That is BS. Like, that is, first of all,
who is dropping those guys? I mean, it's not the easiest matchup in the world this week. Tua's been getting the ball out quick for the Dolphins. So again, those guys getting home could be a little bit tougher. But man, how are you dropping those guys? What is going on?
Absolutely. Got the Bills bunker here. What's up, people? I'm here to support other sports content creators. Thank you. I'll make sure to do the same as soon as we're off the air and I can get to my phone and do that. Thank you very much. He says Josh Allen equals the fantasy GOAT. I mean, it's kind of hard to argue that, man. It's kind of hard to argue. Will in the chat says, I'd fade Rousseau if you have another option. Only 1 tackle last week, 0 sacks. Pick up Chop Robinson. Here's Zach Seiler. Will, you want to be another co-host on Shoot the Gap?
I feel like Will knows what he's talking about here. I like what he's. I like when he backs us up here. But I do. I like Seiler a lot this week. I think he could get back there. We all know that the Texans have struggled to keep Stroud upright the whole game. Even Chop I think is a decent play this week. I like both those guys. I actually, for fantasy purposes, I'm going to have my eye all over that Miami-Houston game. I've got a ton of players on both sides of the ball going in that game. So I'm going to be all over. That one's going to have a lot of fantasy impact for me.
Will says, I played IDP for a long time. I even drafted D'Amico Ryans as a rookie. Texan, I believe. That's hilarious. That's great. All right, let's get into our next play and fade at the position. Let's go to the linebackers. So these 2 linebackers, ironically, were teammates last year. Let me go to my play. My play is Josie Jewell, linebacker, Carolina Panthers. The past month, his tackle rate has been 12.7%, so pretty good. Not like super elite in the high teens, but solid. Over the past month, Fantasy Pros IDP scoring, he has been the linebacker 1, folks, averaging 20.4 points per game. He's even been an asset rushing the quarterback at the 3.5 sacks during that same time span. This week versus Dallas, you want to talk about run-stopping opportunities. The Cowboys basically have Rico Dowdle or bust, and I should say CeeDee Lamb also. But like, you get where I'm going with this. Like the running game is what's going to help Dallas the most, say, in these games. And going against Carolina, which I actually, like. Everybody likes to see a good train wreck. There you go. That's the reference that I got right. I think this is a situation where Carolina and Dallas could actually be a sneaky, fun game to watch. And I just like what Josie Jewell has been doing the past month, obviously who was in like 20.4 points per game. Just really, I can't say enough of good things about him. So he's definitely a start for me, definitely a play for me. My fade was his teammate last year, Cody Barton. And this one kind of hurts to recommend because over the past month, LB 20 in Fantasy Pros IDP scoring. However, Indianapolis allows the 6th fewest points to the linebacker position. Now, Now, while Barton has had tackle numbers, that are good enough to get him as an LB20, what's concerning is the fact that he's only had over the past month a 7.8 tackle rate. Folks, just to give you some idea of what these percentages should mean, if you're like around 13%, you're on par with the average of linebackers in the league. If you're in the mid to high teens, you're a pretty gosh darn good one. If you're in the 20s, you are like elite of elite of elite. Cody Barton, not there. His missed tackle rate is a little too high for my liking. And you would think going against the Indianapolis Colts, oh, well, they got Jonathan Taylor. They're going to run the ball. You know who's been running the ball for the Indianapolis Colts? And JT, you know the answer as an Indianapolis Colts fan. Somebody by the name of Anthony Richardson. And that kind of makes me a little hesitant for Barton's upside in helping in run support, especially during the first round of the fantasy playoffs. I feel he could do a lot better. I like Josie Jewell's matchup versus Dallas. So, so there we go. Josie Jewell, my play. Cody Barton, my fade. JT, what you got?
Yeah, I like what you're saying there. The biggest part playing against the Colts is tough. Their offense just doesn't take a lot. They don't have the ball a lot. Their defense is on the field a ton, and AR and JT are pretty good about making guys miss tackles. So I'm actually with you on that one. I actually was looking at their defensive ends on both sides as plays and as possible fades. Both teams not giving up a lot of sacks lately. Been a little rough, even though those guys have been pretty good lately. So yeah, that's an interesting game, I think, to watch as well. So I like where it is out there. For me, a play, and I got to bring him up because he's been a guy that, even though he's been good pretty much all year, it's just you've kind of felt as an IDP community, like, how do you trust him? Do you keep playing him? And that's Jamie Sherwood for the Jets. TJ Mosley now on IR. All year it's been like, well, is Mosley coming back? How much snap share is he going to get? How much is he going to steal his snaps? Now with him going to IR, I think, you're full bore on Sherwood. Monster game last week. Now, are you going to get that game again? I don't know. He had 18 tackles, 13 solo, 29.8 fantasy points according to Fantasy Pros. Played 96% of snaps, had an incredible tackle efficiency rate of 25.4 last week. So after kind of two subpar games, the 2 weeks before that, big game last week. At this point, with Mosley out, I feel like you can feel 100% confident putting him in there. Now going against the Jags this week, they're not going to get Mac Jones out there throwing the ball all over the field all day. They don't want to do that. The Jags don't want to do that. I think Sherwood, is he going to get 18 tackles again? Probably not, but I think he's got a nice floor for tackles this week. So I'm in on Sherwood. I'm playing him this week for the Jets. My fade, and this is one that if you've been paying attention to snap share, things have gone this week, you should notice. If you haven't got a chance to look at it, I'm bringing it up because that's Tyrell Dodson for the Dolphins. So he was a play for me a couple weeks ago. I was liking what I was seeing at him. Anthony Walker went out with a hamstring injury. Dotson came in and played well. So I was kind of pushing people to play him. I was like, I like Dotson. I think he's going to take over this role. I thought he was going to get this job for the rest of the year. I really did. And then all of a sudden, what do we know? Anthony Walker comes back last week from the hamstring, and he takes all the snaps. It's not even close. Only 6 snaps played for Dotson last week, and they only played because Walker came out and they were checking his hamstring injury that he had from the week before, just checking him out, making sure he was okay, and he went right back in. So Tyrell Dodson, if you look at his fantasy numbers for the year, his overall stats are pretty good. His scoring is pretty solid. So if you're out there looking at him, you're like, oh, that guy might be a decent play. You got to avoid here for the playoffs. Moving forward, it's the Jordan Brooks and Anthony Walker show in Miami. Dotson is out for right now. I'm frankly a little shocked, even though I like Anthony Walker as a player. I'm a little shocked that he just immediately came back in and took this job. Right back. So Dotson's he's definitely a fade. I mean, 100% fade. But I also wanted to point him out because I wanted to get the early warning out for people if they weren't paying attention last week and didn't realize kind of what happened in Miami. I wanted to make sure because I had him Dotson in at least one of my IDP leagues going last week. I thought for sure he would, coming back from the hamstring, Walker would maybe play some, but not. It would mostly be Dotson, and it was 100% Walker. So definitely keep an eye out on that. He's not playable the rest of the way unless an injury happens.
100% co-sign with that. You got to have snaps. You got to be on the field to make plays. There you go. That's my Booker McFarland analysis in a nutshell. Oh my God, I'm in a nutshell. That's a little Austin Powers reference for those who didn't get that. And if you don't get Austin Powers references, well, I don't know what to say, but
trapped in a glass box of emotion.
That's not Austin Powers. That's
oh no, Anchorman. Yep. But whenever anybody says either one of them, they make me think of the other one.
I got you. Let's finish off with defensive backs. Mine are going to be pretty simple here. Julian Love, defensive back, 11, averaging 11 points per game the past month. Leads box snaps for the Seattle Seahawks. Rayshon Jenkins came back from injury. We thought he was going to have a lot of box snap opportunity. He's like so down the pecking order. It's basically Julian Love and Kobe Bryant at the safety position that are leading the way in snaps, and it's Julian Love who's playing closer to the line of scrimmage. This is really good against Green Bay. Like I said earlier, their resurgence with the running game and kind of making Josh Jacobs a point of emphasis just only plays well for his upside. So I could see Julian Love being a good DB2, and if you have if you roll 3 DBs as your third DB, hell yeah, that's fantastic. My fade this week is Jordan Fuller. Look, last week or 2 weeks ago, Xavier Woods, Jordan Fuller, both played 100% of snaps, both played 30+% of box snaps, and it was one of those things where like, oh my God, both of these guys can feast. It's fantastic. You go back this past week to week 14, Jordan Fuller, 15.5% of box snaps, Xavier Woods, an even 50% box snaps. I think we know which one has staying power, and it's not Jordan Fuller. I think it's Xavier Woods. That's the Carolina defensive back you want on your roster, not Jordan Fuller. So, follow the trends and fade Jordan Fuller this week, even though they're going to be getting against a Dallas team that likes to run the ball. I think that favors Xavier Woods more. And what about you, JT? Who you got for your play and fade?
So I'm going to talk a little bit about my Steelers defense here. Coming into the season, anybody who was a Steelers fan was like, they've got to do something at strong safety. Like the box safety was just brutal the last couple seasons. Minka had basically been playing the deep role, but had to come up and do a lot of everything just because they were just so weak at the other safety all year. And the crazy thing is, for IDP purposes, it has been the Deshaun Elliott show, and Minka Fitzpatrick has been an afterthought. Like, he has just not been who you thought he was going to be this year for fantasy. Love the name, love the player, but Minka's been playing deep all year, and he has almost zero impact plays at all because he's been playing deep. 0 interceptions, 0 sacks, 0 fumble recoveries. He's got 1 forced fumbles, his only impact play he's made this year. He hasn't had a double-digit fantasy performance, according to Fantasy Pro scoring, since week 4 and 5. Oh, that's rough. And now you're in the fantasy playoffs. You hate to see a guy like Minka Fitzpatrick and sit him, but we're at that point. He's DB 61 with an average of 7.6 points per game in Fantasy Pro scoring. If his name wasn't Minka Fitzpatrick, it was Minka Johnson. You're not playing DB 61 in your fantasy playoffs. Maybe he has a big game somewhere down the line at some point for the Steelers, but I don't see it coming this week against the Eagles. And it's just been rough. He's played well. Again, it's one of those situations. He's played well as a player, but for IDP purposes, it has not been great. On the other side, the guy taking all the IDP scoring and all the stats is Deshaun Elliott. That's why he's my play and Minka's my fade. Elliott's been absolutely everything the Steelers need this year. He's currently in Fantasy Pro scoring DB3 on the season, which even me, and I've got him in a ton of leagues, I didn't realize he was DB3 right now. He has been phenomenal. He's averaging 12.4 points per game. He scored in double figures. And in Fantasy Pro scoring is a slightly lower scoring system. So if you're in a higher scoring league, he scored even more. In their scoring system, he's got 11 out of 13 games he scored in double digits. He's coming off a 13 tackle performance against the Browns. I did see he popped up on the injury report with a little bit of a hammy. I think he's going to go this week. So obviously keep an eye on that. If the hamstring is worse than they thought and he doesn't play, obviously get him out of your lineups. You don't want to take a chance there, but if he's good to go and they say he's fine, I think you got to play him against a run heavy Eagles unit. And the fact is he's been everywhere. They've been blitzing him. He plays in the box. He's going to help in the run. He's going to help, against the slot wide receivers. He just kind of been all over the place. So it's one of those things. As a Steelers fan, I've got these guys both in a bunch of leagues, and Elliott's the play all day. Minka, you got to ignore the name. You got to ignore that he was probably one of your first guys you drafted this year, and you got to play someone else. He's just not performing for you right now.
Love it. So those are our plays and fades for week 15. For many of you, the first round of the Fantasy Football playoffs. There's a comment here from Scott that I want to bring up here. So maybe it'll help clarify how we do things here. He says, you guys are the only ones I've heard talk IDP rankings on YouTube. Awesome. Let me tell you why that is. There's a lot of IDP content creators. There is not one uniform scoring standard for IDP. It's not like on offense where you have your traditional 4 touchdown points to -1 interception, so on and so forth. It doesn't exist for IDP. You want to know why? It's because there are so many egos in the IDP fantasy football space that they can't come to an agreement of what should a tackle be worth, what should an assisted tackle be worth, so on and so forth. So many people out there, including us, I'm not trying to lump us out of here, we've tried creating our own scoring settings that we think is best for fantasy managers to use. The only problem is, whether it was ours that we created or other ones out there that I'm not going to name because I don't want them to think I'm slandering them, but there are those that are out there. The only problem is, how do I do my research to find out, where they rank, how they stack up? A lot of these leagues for IDP managers, these are like home leagues. Well, if you're telling me, well, in my home league, he's the DB7, I'm like, well, where does he get most of his points from? I don't have access to that information. Only you do. We use Fantasy Pros. Now, granted, do I agree with Fantasy Pros' point value system for plays? No. What I do agree with, though, is the fact that it is easily accessible data and information and rankings you can go off of, that you don't need to reach out to me and say, oh, Jorge, can I get an idea of where they're at in your rankings? Like, no, you can go to this place. Everybody has access to it. Everybody can see it. And you can then tailor what you see there to whatever your league settings are. But at least you have the foundation of where players should be around in terms of their value. And so that's why we go with that.
Jorge, to jump on that, I was going to say, big thing, Scott, you check out Fantasy and Frames, Jorge's IDP rankings. I've got my personal rankings on DLF. If you're a member over there, I do my dynasty rankings more there. I do more of a dynasty ranking than I do a week-to-week play. That's why we talk about plays and fades on this show. Guys we like for this week, next week. My rankings on there are not a weekly ranking. I'm ranking more dynasty value-wise where you're going with guys. But I love to look at my leagues. I'll look at the Fantasy Pro scoring where guys are at like there. And then I'll actually pull up the scoring defensively in my specific IDP leagues, and I'll kind of check where they're at in my league compared to where they are on Fantasy Pros. Because then when I'm looking at that, I can go, okay, this is kind of where that guy's at. Here's this guy, and then I know I got a better idea who I need to play. Is it tackle heavy? Is it a lot for takeaways? Because I'm in a couple leagues that I run where we are really heavy tackle, interception, fumble recovery heavy. If you get a strip sack and recover the fumble, it can be anywhere from a 15 to a 20 point play on one play. So those are the things we talk about. And if you're in a league that is like, oh, it's only 1 or 2 points for a sack, that's why we try to discuss it here. Because again, that sack in one league might be a huge different than that sack in another league. That sack in that other league could be a game, could be a game winner where it's not as much in one league. So we try to hit up on everything as much as we can. Obviously, we can't talk about every last bit of scoring, but we appreciate that, Scott. We do try to do that, and we do love doing the show live for you guys because we love the interaction and everybody coming on asking questions. That's what makes it fun for us.
Absolutely. Will here is in the chat saying, there's only one thing that bothers me about IDP scoring, and that's how certain home teams score the game. The home officiating crew. Okay, so here's the thing, folks. And this will really throw you through a loop. There is not one uniform person in an office somewhere with cameras on the game that makes Bobby Wagner, or that makes I'm trying to make a reference here, but I probably should just stick to what I'm trying to say. Each stadium has their own officiating crew, and they therefore track stats how they see fit. But somebody from Washington's officiating crew might call a tackle an assisted tackle, versus Seattle might call that a full tackle. So let that mess with your brains a little bit more. That's why we kind of do walk a fine balance of fantasy point rankings as well as production. But it's also telling you where these people excel at in the actual game of playing football and how that can tie into fantasy performances. So we definitely like to walk the line of both. We understand nothing's perfect, but we do the best we can, and we've been pretty good at it thus far. And we appreciate you for tuning in and everybody for tuning in. So there you go. That is to answer your question.
That definitely can be frustrating. I believe me, I've there's been a couple times this year. I'm looking at Joey Bosa. I'm watching the game and I'm like, he didn't get an assisted sack for that. He didn't get a half a sack for that. Like, he was like right there. So like, I can definitely see where guys are doing that. Also, if you don't commission your league and you see some stuff like that happen, make sure you bring it up to your commissioner, because I am actually in a league that I thought we got points for half sacks and we don't. So then I'm like looking at it. I'm like, why am I not getting points for that? And then I go back, ask the commissioner. I look at it and I'm like, he's like, oh, we're only giving points for full sacks. I'm like, so if I get 2 half sacks, it's a sack, I don't get points. He's like, no. Oh, okay.
Oh,
so, well, it's like I wish I would have known that, but it's I digress on that. But like I said, that's why you definitely want to know your scoring and kind of go off that, because like I said, I'm in one league where it's very low scoring IDP, and like a tackle is almost worth as much as a sack, like a solo tackle. So I'm like, hey, I'm going to play as many tackle guys as possible, because the sack isn't going to do me as much good as, like I said, the league where if I get a strip sack fumble recovery, I could get 20 some points for that, depending on what happens on the play. Because you can get yardage, how deep the sack is. If you get a recovery and run it back, you can get yards for the return. So you really want to know those factors in your league and kind of bounce those off of what we're saying in the show, because those do make a big difference depending on what league you're in.
Absolutely. All right, JT, I think we've informed the people on a lot, but there's one thing we have to do, and that is talk a little sack lunch. All right, folks, you know the drill. You've been watching all this, what are we at, 15 weeks of the year. Will, I did check my email. I did read it. Thank you very much, and I will definitely send you some swag. Don't worry. Thank you very much for your support everywhere on Fantasy and Frames. We do appreciate that. Sack lunch, very simple. We tell you a player that we think is going to get a sack, and there doesn't have to be a lot of rhyme or reason. There could be as much information as you want to provide, and there could be as little as information you want to provide. And the thing here is that by the end of the fantasy football playoffs, when we do our year in review show after week 17, we're going to go back and rewatch all this stuff, because JT and I have done a horrible job, both of us, of actually remember who the hell we actually picked from week to week. It's for me. So we're going to go back and watch, and the person who got the most right, the person who got the least right, gets a pie to the face. And I'm not talking like Keith Fleming on the Waiver Wire show yesterday, which you should go check out on YouTube.
Saw that. I was done.
Yeah, no. I'm not talking about, I'll put some whipped cream in a pan and it's a whipped cream to the face. No, I'm talking about if it's a pie bet, we're using an effing pie. So that
Real pie.
The real pie. The loser gets a real pie to the face. So without further ado, let me give you my person who I'm going to get a sack lunch for this week. I'm going to go for the Washington Commanders, Dante Fowler Jr. Week 13, both he and Dorrance Armstrong dominated snaps at the edge position. Hey, JT, can you tell me anything about the Saints' offensive line? Nope. That's why. That's
they
why
haven't been good. Like, I know that. A
a
lot of their quarterbacks keep getting hurt. I don't know if that's a problem with the O-line, but their quarterbacks keep getting hurt.
Yeah, so I'm going Dante Fowler Jr. Who you got?
This is a guy, and it's funny that I'm picking him because I feel like I pick on him all the time, even though it's not like I'm really against him. I just don't like him as a play a lot of the time, and that's Odafe Owe for the Ravens. He's actually got 3.5 sacks in the last 2 games. He's got 8 sacks on the season. He's going up against a New York Giants team that is sort of struggling big time. And now they've got DeVito in there, as it looks like Drew Lock, who's my only reason to watch the Giants, is not going to play this week. So DeVito back in there. My Mizzou and Illinois guys, for everybody that knows me, watch those 2 teams. DeVito's back in there, and this game should be a blowout. The Giants should be having to throw the ball a ton in this one. This defense is going to have a lot of opportunities for sacks. So I think Owe gets home this week. I'm taking him in this one. Van Noy was on my list. I was thinking about him too. I think he could get home as he had a sack last week as well, but I'm going with Owe this week. I think he gets at least one against the Giants.
All right. Will in the chat says, so just curious, did you model the name Sack Lunch based off of the Seinfeld episode, The English Patient? No, we did not, but that is a great reference.
That's a good one, though. It's a good reference.
So that's going to do us here for Shoot the Gap and for all the shows here on Fantasy and Frames Wednesdays. We got 8 p.m. Dynasty 365, 9 p.m. we got 4th and Frames, and of course you got us here at 10:30 till what is it now? Midnight. So Jesus Christ,
we're going late. You're gonna get up early. You're gonna be like, oh man,
I'm on parental leave tomorrow and Friday.
Oh,
so
nice, good for you.
I'm okay. Thank you for a little bit. But anywho. Folks, thank you very much for tuning in. Obviously, you've stayed with us through the entire show. We really appreciate that. We appreciate everybody in the chat, everybody who's new to the show, new to all of our shows, or have been with us all season long, picked us up mid-season. Whenever you started joining us here at Fantasy and Frames, we really do appreciate it. JT, before we go, you want to tell the folks anything we got coming down the pipeline? Your IDP plays and fades, maybe?
Yep, we got IDP plays and fades on Fantasy and Frames. Should be out tomorrow before the Thursday night game comes out. I'll have my article with that. 3 plays and 3 fades at each position, and then also, check me out online at X on the X, excuse me, at JT Orange. Put all kinds of info on there. If you in the gambling shows, if you college football, we talked about a little bit. Usually do it Tuesday nights. We're doing a Thursday night this week. Ben he was at a basketball game, couldn't get home in time. So we're going to do Thursday night college betting show where we're going to talk about the playoffs, baby. And then if you're into hockey, football season's come to a close. You're going to get big into hockey here as the football season ends. Our hockey show Around the Ice is on Tuesday nights, 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. Me and Toast and Aaron Tomatich get together, talk a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of gambling, just what's going on in the NHL in general. So it's a fun show. If you're into hockey, you're getting into hockey, check us out there.
And of course, you can catch me every week here on Shoot the Gap. You can also catch me on Dynasty 365. And as well as the Fantasy and Frames Fantasy Football Kickoff Show every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. We go until, sometimes 11:30, 12. It really depends on what questions you all have and how much fun we're having. So tune into us there. And again, Drew Scott at Drew3MR. Seriously, folks, stop what you're doing. Go follow him right now. Putting out great plays and fades information here in the month of December. Just I can't say enough about this guy. Go check his Plays and Fades article out on Friday. Head over to fantasyandframes.com. Check out all of our articles, all of our rankings. Just a lot of work there. People that have, people have been putting in time and research and all that jazz. As well as make sure if you're on YouTube, like, subscribe, follow us. If you are on any of our other social media channels, we're everywhere, folks. So, like, you name it. So just give us a follow. We really appreciate it. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, what you want to hear more of. Obviously, all that jazz. We'd like to hear from you. We love your feedback. So for JT, I'm Jorge. You all have a great Week 15. Welcome to the Fantasy Football Playoffs. Go kick some ass. We'll see you next Wednesday.